Hello everyone, my name is Scott and I work for gogokid and QKids, two ESL online teaching companies. So in this video, I'm going to be going through the interview questions that you're going to see during the hiring process. Hopefully by the end of this video, you feel a little bit more comfortable about what you're going to be asked during an interview. So both companies start out with some pretty basic questions. I'll go through those in just a second. And then in either a later interview or later on in the interview, they're going to ask you some more complex, kind of open-ended questions. And I actually recorded my responses during the interview so we can look at those responses and see what I did well and what I didn't do so well, and analyze that so you can do a better job during your interview. So to start, let's go through the basic questions that both companies are going to ask you when you first start off. So they're going to start by asking, how did you hear about us? So just be honest. If you heard about it on, a Facebook ad, or if a friend told you about it, just let them know. Okay? Totally honest, no problem here. They're also going to ask you if you have a referral code. Now, you might have a referral code from a friend that works at this company already. If you don't have a referral code, that's fine. You can get my referral code in the description to this video below. Just go ahead and write it down on a piece of paper and have it with you when you go to the interview, because they will ask you about it and you can just simply type it into the chat box. So either you already have one or you can use mine. They'll also ask you if you currently work for any other ESL companies. I did not at the time. I got hired at both of these companies at the same time. So either you do or you don't. Just be honest. It's no problem either way. Then they will ask you about your teaching experience. So this one's a little bit more open-ended. I had a lot of teaching experience. I've been teaching for about 10 years. So I explained all my different teaching experience, and it took a little while. I think that's fine. You want to give them everything you have, right? And if you don't have much teaching experience at all, you want to elaborate on what you do have. Right, because you want to be able to tell them something, even if it's only, you've worked with your nieces and nephews or your kids or your neighbors, right? Give them something, right? Don't lie, obviously, but give them something that says, yes, I've worked with kids. I know what I'm doing. I can do a great job. All right, and always be positive the whole time. You want to be smiling, happy during this entire process, because that's what they're looking for. They will also ask you about your degree. All right, you cannot fake this. You have to have a degree to work for either one of these companies. They will ask for proof later on if they like you. So if you don't have a degree, you should just stop now, because they will not hire you. As well, you have to live in either the United States or Canada, or they will not hire you. So if you don't live in North America or Canada, you also might want to stop now. There are other companies that will hire outside of North America. You should go ahead and search them out. But I believe that right now, both gogokid and QKids require you to live in North America. So those are the pretty simple questions they ask you at the beginning of the interview. All right, and then they went into more complex questions before they do the demo interview, which we will talk about later. At this point, I should mention that if you haven't already watched my video on the 5 things you need to do to get ready for this interview, you should go ahead and watch that either right now or before or after you finish this video. There should be a link that pops up right now to the video, right? It gives you the 5 things you need to know before you go into your interview. Very, very important. Okay. Anyway, so let's get into the 3 really hard, not hard questions, but open-ended questions that they're going to ask you during the interview process. The first one they asked me was, why do you want to work for this company? Secondly, they asked, how would you teach an older student and a younger student differently? And then the third question they asked me was, how would you teach a student who has very little English? So I only was asked 3 questions. I've seen other people say they were asked 4 or even 5 questions. I guess it depends how you answer the questions. I'm not really sure. But I'm going to show you how I answered these questions, and then we can talk about them one by one. Let's check out the answer to the first question. Why do you want to work for QKids?
So I teach online math right now, and I kind of miss teaching English. So that would be nice for me, because I've taught English in the past, and I think it's fun. I don't like to only teach one thing, so that would be nice for me. And the schedule is very good for me too, because I don't have any students in the morning. All my students are in the afternoon, so it would work well for my schedule, as well as I think it would be, fun and be interesting.
There were 4 things I liked about that interview answer and 2 things I didn't really like. or wish I would have added. So what I liked about it, I liked that I mentioned my experience. I think that's important for them to know that I have experience working with kids. Number two, I like that I mentioned that I miss teaching English. So obviously I like teaching English. Also, I think important. Number three, that I have a good schedule fit, meaning that I'm going to be able to fill up a lot of their hours and I should be reliable. And then finally, number four is that I thought it was fun and exciting. These are all positive things that I brought to the table about their company and how I would be a good fit. And then what I forgot to add, I would have loved it if I would have added that I really like their platform, because they give you a chance to try out their platform before you come to this interview. And I like that how they teach their kids is through all these different games. So I think it's fun and exciting and it's a good way to learn. And I wish I would have said that at this point. I also wish I would have said that I really like working with kids. You know, it's something simple, but I think it's important to tell them that you like working with kids since you're going to be working with kids. So that's what I wish I would have added. All right, let's get to our second question. How would you treat a older student and a younger student differently?
So, like for example, I used to teach ESL in South Korea, and with the small kids, like you have to be very like animated and super slow, but like excited all the time. But then when you have older kids, you still have to be positive, but you want to be more like mature and direct, even though you're still positive and happy. Because if you were like, oh, great job, every time to an older kid, they think you're kind of silly or goofy and they won't take you seriously. So with an older kid, you have to be more serious and kind of direct. Whereas with a younger student, you have to be slow and, yeah, great, awesome, if that explains it.
So what I liked about that answer is that I again talked about my experience. I think it's always good to bring up your experience and you're kind of explaining why you would be a good fit for their company because you've worked and done this kind of thing before. So I think that really helped out my answer. I also think I mentioned being excited but slowing down for the younger kids. I think that was very important. And then the third note that I really liked was that you always have to be positive no matter whether you're talking to a young student or an older student, that you always have to be positive. One thing I really wish I would have said is that the young kids get distracted like really, really easily. And my interviewer actually pointed this out, that you have to be more animated with the younger kids because they get distracted so often. So I would definitely, if I could go back and change it, I would say that, because younger kids get distracted so easily, you have to be really animated and try to keep their attention more than if you have an older student who's able to be concentrating for a longer period of time. So I would have loved to have added that to my answer. Let's look at question number 3, where they ask you, what would you do in a situation where you have a student who knows very, very little English?
Well, definitely, body language and using TPR would be I think, your number one tool with students who don't have very much English, because you can't say, what is this? They won't understand what you're saying. You need to say, oh, what is this? And, use props or TPR, or even like, act something out. Like in our slides today, there's flying. So you should be going, like this, flying, because they have no idea. If you were to speak to me in Chinese, I wouldn't know anything. So it doesn't matter what age I am, you have to use body language, props, other means.
In that answer, there were 3 things I liked as well. First is that I mentioned TPR and I kind of explained what it was. I think that is really the answer they're looking for, is that you need to use TPR, total physical response. And I'll have another video later on how to use TPR even for beginners, because I'm also a beginner with TPR. And then I also like that I brought up props. That's another great way to teach students, and I think they like hearing that you have more than one idea. And then finally, I said acting it out. And then I mentioned in today's slides. So that shows that I've done my homework. I'm prepared for this interview, because I'm like, well, later on, when I have to teach a child to fly, I'm going to go like this. So it shows that I've at least gone through each one of the slides and I know what's coming up next because I'm prepared. So they probably want to see that you've at least done some homework and are prepared for the interview. Now, at the same time, the thing I missed, and I had this word in my head going into the interview, is modeling, right? Because you have to model everything for these kids when you're teaching them. If you want them to circle something, you can't just say circled. Like, you have to actually circle it on the screen and then erase it and then have them circle it. I really wish I would have said the word model. You need to model your behavior. I just forgot. In the end, I guess it didn't matter too much because I got the job, but I would definitely use the two things, modeling and TPR, in your answer if I could go back and do it again. All right, so those were the 3 big questions that were asked of me during my interview. Now let's just go through a couple more questions that they might ask. So 2 other questions that you're likely to see are, what makes you a good teacher? And then they will probably ask, what is your experience working with children? So these are pretty open-ended. The first one giving you a little more leeway than the second. So the question, what makes you a good teacher? You should have at least 3 things, prepared in your head before you go into the interview when you answer this question. Now, it might be that you're very patient. It could be that you've worked with kids before. It could be that you really enjoy working with kids because it gives you a feeling of gratification when they learn something new, right? Whatever those answers are for you, what makes you a good teacher, you should have 3 answers ready, right? Because they will probably ask you this question, even though it seems like I'm a rarity that they didn't ask me what makes you a good teacher. I was never asked that in my entire interview process. It was kind of strange. But you need to be prepared for it, because more likely than not, they will ask you what makes you a good teacher. And I would have 3 answers ready to go. 1, 2, 3, right? I'm a good teacher because A, B, and C. Get your 3 answers ready. Now, the second question, what is your experience working with children? Right, if you've never been a teacher before, that doesn't mean you don't have experience working with children. So maybe you have your own kids that you teach. Maybe you have cousins, nieces, nephews, whatever children you can think of that you've worked with before. You need to share that experience, because I don't have any experience is not a good answer, right? You're not lying. You just need to come up with something more creative where you've helped kids in the past, where you've worked with children before, and just expand on those experiences. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, right? You need to come up with some kind of answer to that question if you don't have one right off the top of your head. So think about a time when you've helped a kid, because I'm sure you've helped children before, whether it's in academia or whether it's even in sports or in some other area where, you taught a kid how to hit a baseball or whatever the case may be. At some point in your life, I'm sure you've worked with children, and then just share that experience with your interviewer. All right, so those are essentially the questions that you're going to be asked in the interviewing process. I hope this video has helped you be more comfortable answering the interview questions when you go in through the hiring process. So when they ask you for that referral code, please go ahead in the description for this video. You will find that I have left my referral code there. Go ahead and use that. Just write it down and give it to them when they ask. I would greatly appreciate it. And then in our next videos, we're going to be talking about the demo slides that you have to do for both QKids and gogokids. So you can either select those videos now, or we will see you back another time. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.